Snohomish faith-based communities. We have some incredibly distinguished guests here with us tonight. Charles Lewis from First Presbyterian Church is here with us. Charles, you there?
I'm here.
Right on. And we also have, I'm not going to mess your name all the way up. I'm going to call you Eli. Can I call you Eli?
Go ahead, Terry. You can call me Eli.
Eli Rosario.
Only you, though. Only you.
From St. John's Episcopal Church. Thank you guys for being here with us. Again, thank you for spending this time. Charles, we'd like to start off with a word from you, please.
Sure. I'll just introduce myself. I'm Charlie Lewis, co-pastor at the Presbyterian Church in Snohomish with my wife, Ann. We've been there for the last 20 years. And we have two sons, both graduated from Snohomish High School, went on to Whitworth University and have gone on to get master's degrees and have moved back to the area. So we're glad to have them both around here. I guess the question of the day for us here is, where do we go from here? How do we make positive steps forward as a community? And I broaden my reflection to include not just as a community, but really as a country. So here are my thoughts, kind of in narrative form. I'm not sure first that we can move forward without all of us acknowledging, first of all, the anger and hurt and fear and pain that our community felt, seeing the behavior on First Street on May 1st and May 31st and June 1st, and appreciate the City Council responding by listening to that pain and hurt and fear, and anger, and responding with a statement against racism. I think we simply start not by simply calling out what's wrong, but also calling us into the pain and the moral outrage that we're hearing from our Black friends and other people of color, particularly upon the loss of George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery and going back to Emmett Till and that long string of Black lives lost for the last 400 years. So I think we start by hearing people's pain and their anger. And as a white person, I'm frankly a bit troubled and uncomfortable with this because it forces me to look at my own privilege and my own comfort and even my own complicity in some of the things that are wrong. When our ministerial association met and decided a couple weeks ago to write a statement against racism, we permeated that statement with mourning and lament. There were 13 clergy, the vast majority of those who were involved in our ministerial association, who signed a call to unity, justice, and reconciliation, which was placed in a full-page ad in the most recent edition of the Snohomish Tribune. We wanted the community to see that the clergy of our town are united in standing against racism in all its forms. Among other things, the statement asserts that as Christian pastors, we stand brokenhearted with African Americans and all people of color to lament racial violence, hateful speech, and all forms of injustice. We weep with those who fear for their safety simply because of the color of their skin. We mourn for the generations of harm that have been done through hatred and prejudice and through the silence of Christian leaders. We lament that we've not spoken out against racial prejudice and violence consistently enough, loudly enough, strongly enough to end the sin of personal prejudice and the evil of systemic racism, facilitate meaningful change and equity for people of color. So that's a part of the statement that we wrote. And I thank Jeff Sickles, who helped write a large part of that. So the place to start moving forward, I think, is with the humble and hard and uncomfortable work of acknowledging pain and suffering and anger of Black lives and of lives of people of color. The first step in healing is to let them know by our remorse that we hear their pain and that their pain matters to us. And I know all lives matter, for sure. All lives matter. Blue lives matter too, for sure. Of course they do. I have friends, I have neighbors, I have a relative in law enforcement, and they're good people. Let's pretend that we're back in school again, and one of our siblings gets harassed and bullied, and some bully starts a fight with him, bloodies him up and breaks his arm, and he comes home with a broken arm, bloodied, and his mom and dad are there to care for him. Are we as siblings going to say, hey, what are you doing giving so much attention to him for? Don't I count? Well, of course we count to our parents. We all count to our parents. But we're not the ones who suffered that harassment and that beating up. We're not the ones that need that extra care and attention. So if we really believe all lives matter, then we have to stand up, I think, and speak up for those around us who've been suffering and struggling under the knee of systemic racism all their lives, and whose ancestors have been struggling under it for 400 years in our history. So most of us as white people don't experience racial discrimination, dehumanization, or disparity as a daily condition of our lives. But Black people and people of color do. So then, as a sign, one peaceful protester carried downtown said, all lives can't matter until Black lives matter, until the lives of all people of color matter. You'll remember the legendary basketball player Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. He points out that racism in America is like dust in the air. It seems invisible, even if you're choking on it, but then you let the sun shine in, you see it all. You see it's everywhere. And as long as we're vigilant, he says, shining that light, we have a chance of cleaning it wherever it lands. So the church and community leaders do well to, in the words of that old hymn, let our little light shine, and expose that racism wherever it lands, including where it lands in ourselves, if we're going to move forward. The racism we've seen so blatantly on display in our country and in our city is something we can't ignore anymore. And we have to decide, okay, how are we going to respond? Are we going to just write out this moment in history until things hopefully settle down and we return to what's normal for us as white people? Or are we going to stand up and step out with our Black brothers and sisters and other people of color in their centuries-long struggle for justice? Are we going to be part of that tipping point in history? I've been grateful to see, along with members of my church, a lot of students and teachers taking their classroom to the streets and peacefully protesting, along with a lot of young families with children, hundreds of them, all of them hoping to be part of a tipping point as they've been downtown in peacefully protesting. Very positive, very constructive, very encouraging time together, and with masks and social distancing. It's encouraging, I think, to see across this country a groundswell that includes so many ordinary white people, teachers, students, attorneys, doctors, pastors, city council folks, all of us there to stand up for what we believe is right. Sometimes remaining in our comfortable station in life and ignoring the issues of discrimination and systemic injustice isn't any longer possible. As one of my favorite all-time quotes says, and I got this from a Good Earth tea bag, favorite kind of tea, by the way, justice will prevail only when those who are not directly impacted by injustice feel its pain like those who it directly touches. And then they go out and act to change things. Question Maya Angelou often raised is, we know better. Will we then, in this moment of time, do better? Black people and other people of color have had skin in the game their entire lives. And now it's time, I think, for those of us in the white community and those of us in the Christian community and those of us in our whole Snohomish community to get our skin in the game. And not just for this moment in time, but really for the long haul and the long work ahead. Some of the things my wife and I have been doing has been preaching about Black Lives Matter and racial justice since May 31st. Our church leaders are in the process of placing a banner out in front of our church with the words from Micah 6:8 on it that summarize the message of the prophets and Jesus. It says, do justice, love mercy, walk humbly. And we're exploring opportunities to hear stories from persons of color from our church and from our community. And we welcome the chance to join with other churches to pursue education opportunities for our community in tandem with other community groups, and looking to our Snohomish for Equity group to consider leading that effort. I want to close by giving last word to a Harvard professor, Cornel West. I think his insights are a great light for us all, and a call to the churches and community organizations to help shape people of character, because I think nothing is more urgent today than to move forward developing people of character. Wes pointed out that in the funeral for George Floyd, you listen to the music and the message and the prayers, there was not one reference to hatred or revenge. It was all about love and justice. That's because in the great tradition of the best of Black people, those who've been discriminated chronically against and systemically for 400 years, they're still talking about love and how to love and work for justice. He goes on to say, white people ought to give Black America a standing ovation because we in the Black community refuse to give America a Black version of the Ku Klux Klan. After 400 years of being traumatized, we want to dish out healers. We want to dish out folks like Frederick Douglass and Martin Luther King and Fannie Lou Hamer. We have a multicultural, multi-race, multi-generational, multi-religion movement standing for integrity, honesty, decency, and working for justice through love. Now, for me to see a brother like Cornel West struggling after 50 years to correct wrongs that go back 400 years, to see him still pointing to figures of love and healing after all that's been suffered, well, I have to tell you, I'm deeply moved by that. And how, I wonder, can't we all get our skin in the game ourselves and take responsibility for discerning steps that we'll need to take from here to move our city and our country forward.
Thank you, Charlie. Appreciate it. Very well said. Brother Rosario-Cruz, can you please tell us? Yes, I need you to give me the pronunciation so I have it.
So it's Eliacín.
Eliacín, that's how I was going to say it.
Eliacín. Thank you, Terry. Thank you. And thank you for moderating this, and thank you to Council Member Linda Redmond for the invitation. I'm Eliacín Rosario-Cruz. I'm the minister, the pastor at St. John's Episcopal Church, right there on 2nd Street. As far as I know, I am the only minister of color in Snohomish. So there's an interesting relationship. As a pastor, I can speak based on what I believe is the message of most of religions, which is about the value and the dignity of every human being. As a pastor, I can go to my sacristy later on to the pastor room and take off my vestments. However, I continue being a man of color. I cannot take my skin off. And when I hear Charlie, which I think there's a pun intended, have some skin in the game, there's no way I can have skin in the game. Up to not long ago, it was illegal to have establishments in which people of color were not allowed to be. Up to not long ago, it was legal to have, there were laws against marriage of people of different races. And not up to too long ago, up to just a few weeks, actually last week, it was okay in many states to discriminate and to fire people for their sexual orientation. So there is something that I believe the church, the faith-based communities in an ecumenical and an interfaith allegiance with the larger community can bring. And it is to help process those questions about what it is to be human. How are we to relate with each other? What is the kind of world that we want to build, and the kind of world we want to invite, and the kind of world we want our children to be part of? Right now, our congregation in Snohomish, we're figuring this out. I am, as their minister, I'm resourcing them, I'm challenging them. At the same time, I don't want to be their proxy. It is a work that this predominantly white congregation in Snohomish need to do. So I'm challenging them. At the same time, I don't want to carry the emotional baggage and do the work for them as their pastor, because as their pastor, I resource them. As a person of color, I live with this in every day. I believe that is the call or the space for the church to be companion, to be a partner. I bless the youth of St. John's. I mean, not St. John's. I bless the youth of Snohomish for being at the forefront and leading this. We just recently celebrated in the Christian church the Feast of Pentecost, which is a feast when all these different nations hear one message. These different people from different languages, they hear one message. And there's a quote that says that the children, that the youth will see vision, and the older people or the elder, we have dreams. And I can see how the youth have a vision when the world does not have to be the way it have been. When we can reimagine a different way of relating to each other. And the older people, the elder, can dream. They dream to a new reality when they don't have to be in a place of how things work for them. This, to me, that is part of that's the work of the church, is to help us and to be companion in this work toward justice. I mean, movement work is done through different strategies, different angles, and different approaches. Part of my main concern as a pastor also, and as a minister, is to make sure that movement work toward justice have some sort of a spiritual grounding that would get us to the long haul. That this is not just a blip or a hiccup in time. And we'll get tired and we'll get discouraged. But I believe that asking those questions, what is the kind of world we want to build? Who are we as human? How do we want to relate with each other? And have a spaces for those. And I believe I'll be speaking with Pastor Charlie and with others about how we can come together to create a space in which we foster those conversations. That would carry on to the long haul, because this is a long haul work.
Thank you very much for your commentary. Very much needed. Both of you guys, thank you. Spiritual leaders in our community, very much needed. This is one of the pillars that's going to move us forward, making Snohomish as great a city as we possibly can. Again, thank you guys for joining us here tonight.